Beginning the session. Hello, participants. Hello, and a very warm afternoon to everyone assembled here, ladies and gentlemen, students and professionals. We are really thrilled to have you all here with us today for this insightful session on Gen AI, which we all know is the most talked about technology in recent times. And we all have tried our hands on ChatGPT, Bard, DALI, but somewhere we are still unsure about how to explore Gen AI, where to begin, whether or not to pursue it, what job careers are there, so on and so forth. Keeping that in mind, today's discussion promises to be both informative and engaging. As we explore this emerging technology, we are fortunate to have with us our distinguished speaker, Mr. Sujay Bhattacharya, who is a Senior Vice President, Digital Workplace Services with NTT Data, and who is also an expert in the field. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Sujay and hand over the session to him for the deep dive into Gen AI as a technology. We understand the attendees will have questions throughout the session, but we request to reserve all such questions, as we will take all the questions towards the end of the session. Over to you, Sujay, for the session.
All right. Thank you so much, Hina. Just a very quick check. Can you hear me all right? And can you see my screen?
Yes, Sujay, we are able to see your screen.
Perfect. So good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the students, professionals. What I'm going to take in the next about 30 to 35 minutes, and then we'll open up for Q&A, is essentially what are the use cases, or what is the industry seeing from a generative AI perspective, and what does it mean for the job market or the skills when it comes to how we use generative AI for our day-to-day work. So let's just get started on that. So there are essentially 4 sections that I'll run through. The first one is understanding generative AI, and this is more in terms of what are the use cases that a lot of organizations, how are organizations using this from a very core fundamental perspective. Then we'll do a little bit more deep dive on what are the deployments that multiple organizations are doing in this area, and I'll focus a little bit more on the IT services industry. The third is the changing job roles in the market, and I'll focus a little bit on digital workplace because that's what I head. And we'll talk about some of the skill sets that's changing in this area, and how the reskilling is going to be important. And the last but not the least is, especially for the students on this call, what are the typical skill sets that is beginning to emerge in the market, with more and more generative AI being a part of the business itself. So let's get started with the first section. And this I'm sure everyone is aware of, but when you ask generative AI, when you ask different generative AI models, ChatGPT or any other, is what does generative AI mean? It essentially gives a very, very simple definition. It's a form of machine learning capable of creating new content. And the fundamental difference between what we are seeing with generative AI versus what we've seen with this technology before, and it's not like AI is a new technology, it's been here for years, is the ability for the technology or the generative AI to create content, right? It's not looking at an existing content and only extracting an existing content, but creating a new content based on how well a model is fine-tuned and how well a model is trained. So what that should tell you is that there is that process where there is a fine-tuning of these models, and there is an efficacy of these models that keeps increasing as and when they become more and more effective and more well-trained. So that's really what's generative AI, with text to text, text to image, and vice versa, text to video and vice versa, and text to audio and vice versa. So this is something that all of you have been aware. Now, what's really happening in the industry? And I'm going to take a few minutes on this slide. So on the left-hand side, what you essentially see is something that has caught the headlines quite a bit on generative AI. So let me take 1 or 2 examples. BMW, and I don't know how many of you have seen this, but BMW is a very interesting use case from generative AI perspective. So it's the ability for generative AI then to look at the entire process of manufacturing and remove parallax error, uh, human error, is an incredible use case that's being used by BMW in its manufacturing. But what's interesting is it allows the manpower to then be utilized in something more complex and something more critical tasks. So the point that I'm trying to make out here is generative AI is being used for the improvement and productivity and the betterment of a particular process, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. But it's also then allowing people to get reskilled and move into different areas of work. So a it's not that generative AI is taking away the jobs, but it's allowing a reskill. Now, if you then look at the right hand side of the matrix, and this is a very interesting one in terms of how generative AI seems to be progressing in its maturity curve. So if you look at pre-20 and on the x-axis, you see text, code, image, and video gaming. If you see on the x-axis, pre 2020, it was more in terms of translation or autocomplete online, which all of us have been used to. If you look at then 2020 and 22 onwards, there 2022, you started seeing some of the other aspects of generative AI coming across image, video, code, as well as text. But what's going to happen in future is more and more of these models, as and when they get more fine-tuned and the efficacy increases of these models, they are going to come as close to being the right generation of text or code or image, right? So the improvement in the model will allow more and more of, instead of having initial drafts, move towards final drafts in text, or move towards a text to product final when it comes to code. Even images, there will be final drafts, you know, almost as compared to or sometimes better than the artists. So the maturity is expected to improve year on year. And what that means for all of the people on the call, including myself, is to continuously make sure that we are reskilling to get into a more complex jobs, because more and more of these will start moving into where generative AI will become better and will become more effective. Now, let's quickly jump into what's happening in the industry. So before I jump into the use cases that's happening in the industry, I want to take a few minutes on what are the different advisors, or what are the different growth areas in this section. So number one, if you see, Forrester clearly says ignoring generative AI will be a costly mistake for enterprises. And all enterprises are looking at generative AI as one of the key aspects of what they will funnel the growth with. Gartner has its statement that says by 2026, over 100 million humans will engage robot colleagues, which means you will start more and more interacting with bots, and that's already a reality in organizations, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Now, the growth is interesting. The growth is essentially primarily in, three sectors have seen the highest growth in generative AI. One is BFSI, consumer, and healthcare. And BFSI is an interesting piece. You would have seen in the previous slide, I actually had Bloomberg, and Bloomberg's built up its generative AI model for getting better and better at looking at analytics, looking at the data, and creating advisory uh, through generative AI and large language models. So banking sector, healthcare, consumer have begun to use this. I'll talk about some of those details in the later slide. And if you see the McKinsey report, it talks about, what percentage or what is the usage across different industries, and most of us sit in the advanced industries, which is more IT, and even if you see the last one, technology, media, and telecom. you would see a large chunk of people that have either regularly using it for work or outside of work, and a majority of them are using it for their personal life. So the amalgamation of, slowly, as and when the security aspects of these models become more and more well tuned and secured, you would see a lot of the stuff that we're doing on on our personal side move into a professional usage that will allow these to be more widely spread in enterprises. And that journey is already happening with a lot of organizations, where the only thing that's holding back a very widespread usage of these in some of the enterprises are the security aspects that enterprises are looking at. But that should not be too long before that's figured out and it becomes widely spread in organizations. So let's jump into what are the different use cases that we are seeing in the market, or and I've seen in my daily usage. So I'll run through this in a little bit more detail. So number one is virtual assistant. Now, all of us have used virtual assistant in our personal life, but when it comes to organizations, we are seeing a huge percentage of work that's shifting into virtual assistant. And this is not only from a perspective of level one support or help desk, service desk, or call center support, but it's also virtual assistant, which is more knowledge driven. So some of the use cases of virtual assistant that organizations are doing is for high-end critical applications or high-end support. There is a knowledge bot that's allowing the ability for level one and level two support to be much more advanced for the customer base, and a lot more knowledge that can be consumed through these virtual assistant. Content generation has been big. There's multiple use cases in the IT industry. One of the use cases that's been very prevalent is also how do you generate responses to RFP? How do you generate responses to typical customer questions? And that's been already in test in multiple organizations, wherein how do we use generative AI and the intelligence to actually respond to queries, respond to RFPs, and see the efficacy. In my personal usage of this, I've seen that the response to some of the queries or even RFPs by generative AI is perhaps pretty close to what a typical experienced solution architect would do in this space, and that's very exciting. In terms of productivity and in terms of the efficacy. Sentiment analytics, being a part of NTT, that's been one of our core strengths, and we've got multiple use cases in voice mining, where understanding the sentiments of the customer, understanding the sentiments of a particular interaction is something that's very, very well matured and utilized in the industry now. So that's one area where it's almost very prevalent across the base. Language translation is anyone who's today using any smartphone. In my iPhone, I have a language translation that's using these models. So today, language translation is there for everyone to be used, and that is one area that's being used across the board, even in enterprises where you're beginning to have a lot more centralization of services with the ability of language translation that's coming in, and more accuracy in the language translation. Today, on how to is again a pretty interesting aspect. If I look at from a digital workplace standpoint, and if I look at the productivity of this, almost all standard questions have now been almost done by the bots, which has then allowed the level one support in this space to be looking at a lot more skilled questions and a lot more skilled technical support for the users. So again, some of the more simple tasks or repetitive tasks, may not be simple, but repetitive tasks are moving more and more to these bots. Now, like I just called out, this has been very interesting, and I've spoken about this. Let me give you a few examples of what we have utilized in our own usage. So knowledge advisor is something that's been used quite a lot in 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 digital workplace. Now, what this essentially does is the models are being more and more fine-tuned and trained on certain applications or certain use cases which we see in our customer environment. And those are essentially coming in as knowledge advisors into the industry for support. Imagine you getting a a call for a typical, application, uh, you know, in healthcare. You typically would need someone who's very experienced in that application or has worked in that environment for providing the right level of support for these doctors or nurses calling in. What this has allowed us to do is to utilize these knowledge advisors or the bots and really give a much better response and a much better resolution to users when they call in. We've also seen a lot of advent in terms of how we've used Microsoft Copilot for our customers. So going to the next block out here, that's been very prevalent. A lot of customers are looking at that environment, are looking at how they utilize Microsoft Copilot and all the possibilities in that technology more and more in their in terms of improving the productivity, allowing users to get a lot better support from the technology. That's been a lot of use cases that we have run with customers, and we've developed IPs around that's allowed us to work with customers. I've already spoken about sentiment and service advisor. Security advisor is something that is again very interesting. There, in one of the use cases, we've actually used generative AI to actually identify any PII information in a certain text or in a certain data, and then automatically remove the PII data. Uh, so that's allowed us to be a lot more, secured and also relevant to all the local laws or regional laws. And if you had to put a person doing that work, we would have to put a lot more people, and we would still have a lot more parallax error with the people supporting that instead of the security advisor. So that's been a very, very important use case for us that we've developed. Uh, the second last one, the smart enterprise service management. This is one area that I think is almost the input point or the entry point for a lot of the freshers in the digital workplace area. Now, what this is essentially doing is a lot of the pattern identification, a lot of the hotspots identification, also identification for process automation, trend that is being used through multiple different platforms, ITSM platforms. This is one area where generative AI has had a very big impact on improvement of operations, and this is one area that especially within digital workplace or even IT services, is being used very widespread to improve the operations or improve the quality of operations. And the citizen developer program, this is one area where we have moved a lot. You all would have heard of low code, no code. You all would have heard of complex code generations getting simplified. This is one area that has been used widely for us, in the space of even utilizing or providing better services in our virtualization area. So we've used a lot of the citizen developer program to build multiple different use cases that allows us to sell the virtual platform that performs much better, and for the users to utilize it much more. So if you look at the utilization of all of these in organizations across these different use cases, it's really being used for improving operations and reducing the parallax error in the environment. And that's really the use cases that a lot of organizations are putting in. Now, if I'm looking at the most important aspect of, and I think the most interesting aspect for all of the people listening onto the call, especially the students, is what is the impact that it's going to make on essentially the job roles in the market. Now, first of all, I'm sure a lot of you would have, seen a lot of LinkedIn, messages around this, a lot of campaigns around this, but almost all of the experts within the industry clearly are saying that generative AI is not to be looked at something that's reducing the workforce or taking away the workforce. It's more about skilling the workforce and improving the level of the entry knowledge in the environment. That's really what's happening with the advent of generative AI. Now, if you look at the 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 history or the progress of generative AI, it's essentially getting more and more accurate, and therefore a more and more work that can be moved into generative AI. So on the right hand side, it's a really nice skill set matrix or the generative AI value chain matrix by McKinsey. So if you look at the top three boxes, should give you a good idea about what are the kind of skill sets or what are the kind of knowledges that the industry will look at new entrants in the next 3 to 5 years. And the bars are essentially a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of what are the size or the scale of opportunities. So let's go top to bottom out here. The number one is services. If you look at what we are, even a lot of IT industries are using, is service around specialized knowledge of how to leverage generative AI. So one thing is having generative AI, but the second thing is also having the right prompts or understanding how you communicate with the generative AI technology or the models for getting the right information. And then also a lot of use cases are being used for fine tuning, where you keep reinforcement learnings in the model so that it gives you more and more accurate and more correct response. So almost like a prompt engineer, and I'll talk about that in the next slide, but prompt engineers coming in and creating more and more service around this. But a lot of these models are also getting more and more pre-tuned. So understanding of how to use generative AI is going to be one of the skill sets. That's going to be key. The second is, how we utilize applications. So B2B or B2C products that use foundation models, either largely as fine-tuned or particular use case. So there, an understanding of the domain, or at least having a understanding of the of how different domains work would be very critical to be useful for fine-tuning or making these foundation models more and more effective. And the last is, you should have a basic understanding of at least machine learning to curate or to fine-tune these models, and then also create storefronts between applications and the foundation models of how these would work in different use cases. So if you are coming into the market and you're looking at what are the skill sets that the market is really looking at, I would focus on the top three buckets out here to start utilizing or start understanding the skill sets, and really make sure that these are the skill sets that you're developing when for the next 3 to 5 years for you to be successful in the IT industry. That gives me about 3 minutes before my half-an-hour clock, Henna. So back to you on.
Thank you, Sujay. So now, as we reach the halfway point of our session, we have an exciting opportunity for everyone here. We'll be conducting a quiz with 5 questions based on what you have learned so far in the presentation. The first person to answer each question correctly will win Amazon vouchers. 5 questions, 5 people. The people could be same if they answer first. So you have to participate by writing the answer in the chat box and not responding to the poll per se. I repeat, you have to answer in the chat box. Um, so I'm launching the poll. Here goes your first question. I repeat, you don't have to answer to the poll. You have to respond in the chat box. The first one to answer in the chat box would be the winner. We are still getting answers from people. I hope. Parul, have you got the winner for this particular question? Okay, let me end this particular question. Next, let's moving on to the second question. Okay, we have received a few answers. Yes. Okay, now launching the second question for you. We might have received answers by now. I'm ending this question, launching the third one.
Just give us little more time, Hina.
Oh,
Thank you.
all right. Sure. Launching the second one again. I'm sorry, the second one has ended. Moving on to the third question. I would keep it for a longer duration, Parul. Thank you so much. One second. I'm launching the third one. I believe the answers would have come in because we have already reached 200 people who have answered. Moving on to the next question. The question is, in which year did OpenAI launch DALI to the public? Giving it some time here. Okay, ending this one, starting with the next. This is the last question of the lot. Question number 5. What are life sciences companies testing Gen AI for? This is a tough question. What are life sciences companies testing Gen AI for? All right, we are ending the poll. We had 5 questions. We would have five winners for this particular session or poll or quiz. I request all the winners, not per se all the winners. My colleague Parul is noting down all the name of the people who have answered first. As we have received a lot of answers for the questions that we placed, the results will be announced towards the end of the session. And whoever the winner is, either drop a private mode chat to the session host or email the details to hina@nascom.in. I am pasting this particular email ID on the chat box. 1 minute. Mm. So we will announce the results towards the end of the session. Whoever's names is announced, I request them to reach out to either the host through private mode or through the email ID that I just posted in the chat box. Rest assured, we will get back to you with the details of the awards. I'm now handing over the session back to Sujay to discuss the new roles in the industry led by Gen AI technology and how one should prepare for the same.
Hey, thanks, Anna. It was interesting. I was tempted to actually go back to this slide and get some of the answers for the guys on the call, because I really didn't go through too much of the ones out here for industry specific, but I hope people answered it correctly. Uh, Going back, so we just as a recap, we spoke about, what are the three key main skill sets that we are really looking, the industry is really looking for entrants in terms of the knowledge, and in this area, because uh, you know having a basic understanding and having, in my mind, and this is my personal opinion, but having an understanding of a domain and the use cases that can be run on a domain is getting more and more prevalent and more important. So just a generic understanding of any technology without its overlay on domain, it's going to get more and more difficult to be utilized within the IT or within the IT services. Now, if you then look at the generative AI application landscape, and I've spoken about some of these already in my previous slides. If I look at and I did see questions coming up on ethics, so we will discuss about that in the Q&A, or but I'll touch upon that now. Is in the digital workplace area, or even the IT services area, there are about these four roles has really become more and more prevalent and will become more and more prevalent as we become more and more matured within the generative AI space. So number one is the AI ethics officer. So as generative AI can generate content, products, uh, there is more and more requirement or retraining of the models to make sure that they're aligned to either the company values or the societal norms or the regulations. So there have been cases where uh, you know the ethics can be questionable in some of the responses where it's used for a generic purpose. So that's really what enterprises are really looking at, is more and more ensuring that the models are fine-tuned, the models are retrained, wherein the answers to what the customers are looking for are in line with what are the company guidelines or the company values. And that, in my mind, is generating a role in organizations to continuously retrain these models. And it goes back to, freshers coming into the IT industry, more and more understanding the domain and understanding the use case of what this is being used for will allow them to become better at understanding what are the answers, or what are the responses from generative AI that can be in the borderline of whether they are, ethically correct or incorrect. The second is, call it an AI trainer or a prompt engineer. This is one area where, uh, you know, we've been focusing a lot on, are areas where you have, these freshers that are coming into NTT, into my team, into digital workplace team, are working as prompt engineers, you know, uh, who are getting specialized on training models and to meet the specific requirements for these models to respond. So it's almost retraining the models and creating the right prompts that give an output that is in line with what you would want the generative AI or the large language model to provide. Then you have the AI ops engineers. You know, you have a lot of the companies are looking at fine-tuned foundation models, so maintaining them, or also how we utilize a lot of these SaaS solutions, but maintaining the connections, the API economy, and so on and so forth is going to be critical knowledge of the AI ops engineers. And the last is AI integration specialist. Like I just mentioned, you know, understanding, what the business requires, what are the domain specific generative AI tools, and and how all these different platforms will work as an end-to-end process or an end-to-end output for the customer rather than a disjoint process is going to be a key task for the AI integration specialist. So if you're looking to, look at what are the key roles that, you know, that companies are looking for, and that is a growth area for your career, I would look at these four roles very critically. Now, what these four roles essentially drill down from a skill perspective is, before I get to the skills, I saw this very interesting, you know, mental map on LinkedIn, which talked about, what are the typical skill sets that the market is looking at, and I like the core message, which is focus on skills and not on roles. In my mind, 82% of leaders say their employees will need new skills to prepare for the growth of AI. So now, if you look at what I spoke in the previous slide in terms of some of the critical roles that are coming up, the skills that will allow you to get into that role is a familiarity of natural language processing. There are a lot of tools, a lot of models in the market, but just a basic understanding of how this natural language processing works. How do you then look at tokenization or embedding, which is a very core in how generative AI functions? That basic understanding will be very, very critical from a skill perspective. Some machine learning fundamentals. How do you look at supervised, unsupervised data? How do you look at, multiple algorithms? A basic skill set on uh, you know, some coding. So Python or R or C will be always at an advantage for candidates who have that. Uh, again, having an understanding in terms of how to utilize some of these AI models, how to almost interact with these models, familiarity with AI frameworks. I think problem solving is very, very important because, you know, I think, when I was, if you look at how, uh, if you look at how the education system or almost we've been tuned, is we've always been given a problem and we've been asked to solve the problem. In my mind, it's also very important more and more, as in when you start to learn how to interact with generative AI and prompt engineering, is to articulate or frame a problem. So if you just flip the story, and if you have a set of data and then you're needing to articulate that problem statement to generative AI, it's interesting that how intuitively we are tuned to solve a problem but not articulate a problem as well. And that's a skill, that I think is going to be very, very critical for people coming into the job market. I think creativity is a given for any level uh, of any level of work today, in the industry across, and that'll essentially drive a lot of what we think is going to be important for different models or different use cases that are being built. So, while these are important skills for those roles, um, I found this map very interesting purely because if you look at one of the aspects is 21%, right at the bottom of the mental map, is a 21% AI delegation prompts. And that's interesting, is how critical, and it's a big chunk of what is expected from the workforce, is how to utilize uh, these models and how to keep retraining these models and have almost prompts, meaning almost have the way to converse and the right conversation with these models. So it's not a slam dunk. You have to learn, and that's a learning process. And more people who have that intuitiveness to articulate, frame, and prompt the model better, they would have an edge coming into the workforce. With that, I hit my 45-minute mark, Hina, and 15 minutes open for questions.
Yeah. Before we move on to the questions, students and professionals who are attending the session, we have this deck, we have this slide in front of you with some QR codes. First one is for Future Skills Prime. It's an initiative by NASCOM in association with the Ministry of Electronics and IT, METI as we know it. And if you found today's session to be intriguing and wish to explore further certification courses, other short-term pathways on Gen AI and other emerging technologies, you can scan the first QR code on your screen, and it will take you to Future Skills Prime platform, wherein you can sign up and access all the courses for free. We are also the second QR code. We are also running our festive campaign called India Ka Skill Tyohar. You can join. You can scan the link and join the link to sign up on the Future Skills Prime platform and learn Gen AI, and again free of cost. And it will take you to 30 minutes short pathways wherein you can earn and flaunt your badges on LinkedIn to prospective employers as well as your network on LinkedIn. So this was the second QR code. The third one that's present, that is available on your screen, this is for invitation to mark your calendars for our next webinar session, that is tomorrow. That's happening on the topic of the playbook to beat IT career slowdown. It's scheduled for tomorrow, 30th of November, 4 to 5 p.m., again the same time. And like this session, it promises to be an enlightening discussion, and we look forward to your participation. Now, we open the session, open the floor for the Q&A session round. As we continue, I encourage all the participants to ask all the questions they have on the chat box or on the question Q&A box that we have over here. I would be reading a few of them that we have received, because keeping interest of time here. Okay, let's start. So how do we do this? Today I'm taking questions as I see them on the question and answer box. So Sagnik Adhikari, since we have answered this question about the ethics part of Gen AI, so he has question with its ability running riot and the number of ever increasing for content. How to create? Masquerading someone else's IPR rights or otherwise to create plagiarized, tampered, novel content. How are we even supposed to protect what is ours, our own creations? This is the first question.
Yeah, so I think if I understand the question correctly, there's always pros and cons for every technology. So, at least from an enterprise standpoint, there is, and that's exactly the reason why enterprises are taking a cautious approach to this technology, is where the models are being continuously fine-tuned. Like I gave an example, we are using generative AI to make sure that no PII data is ever sent out. So enterprises, when are looking at controlling these models, fine-tuning these models, and making more and more responses that are aligned to the ethical or the values. Now, when it comes to the general use of this, there will always be that debate whether it's being utilized. But when it comes to enterprises, which I'm more focused on in today's session, uh, enterprises are making more and more effort to make sure that the responses or the models are responding to the guidelines of all the companies or all the policies.
All right. Thank you, Sujay, for the insightful answer on that. I'll take one more question. We have one question from Vishnukant Pandey asking. The screen moves 1 second. I'm sorry for this. Vishnukant Pandey asked, I'm holding software development senior manager position. Would it be worth to learn AI and move from project management to technical side of AI ML?
I mean, the answer to that is yes. But but by no means does that answer mean that software development will be replaced with AI. There's a lot to that whole function than just code generation. So it's always going to be useful, because no matter what role, no matter what position you are in an organization, if I look at myself, if you're not going to get trained on AI and understand AI, at some point in time, it is going to be used for the work that you're doing. And the better understanding you have of how to use these models or how to curate these models, the better chance you have of success. So I would certainly, including myself, continuously look for upskilling on the AI side for sure.
Okay, we can take one more question, Sujay. Meera Guthi asks, AI models depend on good data, but most companies still struggle with data analytics and getting insights from data. How should companies deal with this issue?
And that is exactly where prompt engineering or roles like that are coming in, because as in more and more uh, data models are becoming larger, the accuracy of these models will improve. If you remember the slide that I showed you, we are still we're still looking at the final draft, as per that report in 2030. So it's not like these models are already replacing a final draft. They are reducing a lot of the human effort, but it will take time for models to get to a final draft maturity, and that will only come from understanding the data or the quality of data that's being fed into these models. So good question. It will be a continual process for all organizations.
Thank you so much, Sujay, for answering all the questions. Okay, now we have the results with us for the polls or the quiz that we did. Uh, the first question was, what is Gen AI? The correct answer to that is Gen AI is machine learning, and the winner is Shri Vidhi Nayak. I repeat, it's Shri Vidhi Nayak. The second question was according to Gartner, by 2026, who would be your colleagues? The answer was robots, and the winner is M. Mohammed. The winner is M. Mohammed for the second question. The third question is, can AI be used for fashion and lifestyle sector? So the answer was yes, and the winner is Tandil. Vinesh Tandil. The fourth question was, uh, when did OpenAI introduce or launch DALI for the public? And the answer was 2022. And the winner is Pratik Agarwal. The winner for the fourth question is Pratik Agarwal. The correct answer to the fifth question about how do life sciences companies plan to use or test Gen AI, the answer was to speed up the process of drug development. We didn't get many correct answers for this, but Meera Guthi was closest, and she's the winner for this. Thank you so much, participants, for participating in this quiz. Please, again, I repeat the process to win your Amazon vouchers. Send your email ID and phone number on the private chat to the host so that we can send across your vouchers, or at least, or another method that you can, another process that you can go for these Amazon vouchers is to write to me, hina at the rate nascom.in. I have already pasted that email ID on the chat box. I'll do that again so that you know. This is my email ID. The winners, I request you to reach out to me or respond to us in a private chat mode. Now, as we are at the end of the session, I would like to express my extreme gratitude to the speaker, Mr. Sujay Bhattacharya, and participants as well for being part of this exciting, thrilling session on generative artificial intelligence. I would also like to remind participants to submit email IDs again for the Gen AI Quiz Awards that we just did. And we are at the end of the session. So wishing everyone a continued success in their learning journey. Once again, thank you each and every one of you for being part of today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.